Tonight on CTV News, a man is charged with murdering a 15-month-old baby boy. When Facebook catches a thief, what did happen to this brazen criminal? And concerns over influenza grabbing a foothold in Canterbury.
Broadcasting across Canterbury, from the CTV studio, this is First at 5.
Good evening, this is CTV News, now streaming live at ctv.co.nz, and we begin tonight with the man charged with the murder of a Christchurch toddler. Yes indeed, this just released this afternoon. Ihaka Stokes was that little boy, who could forget. We now know that the man was known to the toddler. The 15-month-old was killed almost a fortnight ago, with one police officer describing the assault as the worst he'd ever seen in his career. Detective Senior Sergeant Michael Ford says for legal reasons they can't name the man. However, what they have said is that a 22-year-old will appear in the Christchurch District Court tomorrow, and just repeating that, we know that the man is connected to the young child. And Detective Senior Sergeant Ford says 7 detectives are still working full-time on this case, and we'll bring you more on that story on tomorrow night's bulletin. Well, police have arrested a teenager for assaulting an elderly man in New Brighton Mall. The 72-year-old man had been hospitalised with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. A 19-year-old will appear in the Christchurch District Court tomorrow. Well, he was caught on Facebook stealing knives, and with so many strings of offences on his name, a 38-year-old man behind the brazen theft at Valentino's restaurant earlier this year will probably go to jail.
A thief that was caught through Facebook has been ruled out for home detention. Cafe Valentino's owner posted CCTV footage on the restaurant's Facebook page when the theft happened in March, which generated a huge response. The robber, Nathan James Weeks, can be seen stealing a bag of gear worth $1,700. Rehabilitation is being considered in this case, with Weeks pleading guilty on a range of charges. These include a house burglary in Addington, theft of an iPhone, theft of the chef's bag and contents, interfering with a vehicle, and breach of prison release conditions. The 38-year-old wrote a letter about his intentions to understand the background of his offending so he can finally move on. Judge David Saunders said at Wicks's hearing yesterday that the letter might trigger other suggestions for rehabilitation steps, but the court needed to be mindful about public protection, especially in his home burglary cases. Wicks thanked the judge as he was taken back to the cells to await his sentencing in the beginning of September this year.
If you've been down with the flu this winter, you're not alone. Cantabrians in particular are suffering, and now there are 2 strains of the virus grabbing a foothold in the region.
The flu is gaining a foothold in Canterbury and may not have peaked yet. The Ministry of Health says there are now 2 strains of influenza across New Zealand this winter, with the second, less contagious strain more common in the South Island.
We have begun to see the increase. I was confidently saying it's looking good, but we now have experienced an upturn, and in fact the rates of flu in Christchurch are now exceeding the national average. So in many ways it's good that so many people have got the vaccination in Canterbury. We do normally get very good coverage in this province.
Minister Jonathan Coleman is also recommending the vaccine, which he says should protect against both flu strains. About 1/4 of the population has taken the vaccination this winter. The Immunisation Advisory Centre is urging people to get vaccinated, particularly those over 65, pregnant women, people with long-term health conditions, and children under 5 who have had respiratory illnesses. And the vaccination is free.
It's free for anybody with a chronic illness, and it's free for pregnant women.
The centre says it was unusual for 2 flu virus strains to be circulating, and it is possible for a person to catch both.
Regenerate Christchurch, the new entity to take over from so-called Sarah, doesn't take effect until next year, but the government has only given residents a few more weeks to make a submission on the future of this city. Jared McCulloch has that story.
Do you believe you should have a say in the future of our city?
That's what Rebuild Christchurch's Dion Swiggs is asking in a new online video, a push to get Cantabrians to have their say.
I actually had a dream about how can we engage people, get people involved, interested in actually our city. And then I thought, well, what's a better way than writing an article? I do some writing and things like that, but that's what everybody else is doing. And so a video was a good way to start that conversation.
So he got his camera out and produced a nearly 3-minute long video alongside local broadcaster Chris Lynch to give an insight into the new plan of Regenerate Christchurch and what Canterburyans can do to get their voice heard.
Should the government have all the say in the future use of the residential red zone land? And who should lead the engagement of what happens here?
Earlier this month, the government announced plans to close the doors for Sarah and create a new organisation, Regenerate Christchurch, a move to eventually give total power back to the council in 5 years' time. But the public only has a month to put a submission forward, and Dion says it's confusing and people need more time.
It took me a whole week to actually understand what it meant. It took me a whole week to get what the recovery plan is about, or the transitional plan and the advisory board and the cabinet notes, and actually to understand that it's too complicated. And that's why I had to take a step back and go, well, what really is going on? What really matters? And what really matters is actually showing interest in the city.
The online video, Do You Care About Christchurch, urges Canterburyans to stand up and be counted, following the government's new transition, which will take effect next year. And Dion says it's been quite a challenge to get those people to submit, nearly 5 years on from the first earthquake.
So many people were saying to us, oh, we're just too tired, or the government's not listening, or we don't care, just do what needs to be done. That's great, and that is the attitude of many people. But we cannot have that attitude right now. We actually need to stand up and actually be counted for.
The clip has been seen by nearly 10,000 people on YouTube, only being up since Monday. But there have been more viewers and comments made on different social media platforms.
And so far we've had over 40,000 views of the video. Hopefully that'll get up to around 60,000, which means we've actually targeted the right audiences.
Swigs has been keeping a track on the rebuild of Christchurch right from the very start in the first earthquake in September 2010. And through his website, there's a large following of locals on social media with regular information keeping the public informed about the rebuild's progress. And he says now is more important than ever for Canterburyans to have their say about the transition plan.
It really takes a stand around what our city is and how we're going to take this next stage of the recovery.
A similar process was set up called Share an Idea, making up the 100-day Christchurch blueprint in 2012, but people never had a chance to voice their opinion.
We didn't actually get any chance to consult on that blueprint plan for the central city. There was no hearing, nothing afterwards. It was just, this is what we're doing and we're going to do it. Now we have a chance, this is the first time since then, to actually say maybe potentially around, well, we don't like that idea, or this is different now.
And he says now's the time to take a stand and be heard.
If we don't have that same impact this time around, then the next 5 years are going to be around, well, there's not that mandate for people wanting to be involved in the city, and that's just not acceptable. What is actually worse? Is it a government that we think that doesn't listen, or a government that we think doesn't listen and that doesn't think we care about our own city? And that's really the message that we're trying to get across.
The submission date closes in 2 weeks' time and can be made to Sarah on their website. Jared McCulloch, CTV News.
And still to come here on CTV News, the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War is remembered right here in Christchurch. Welcome back to CTV News. Are Lyttelton residents in danger of a major explosion? Well, that's what oil companies are saying, and the Christchurch City Council is taking them seriously.
The Christchurch City Council will carry out urgent risk assessment of the Lyttelton tank farm this week. The owners of the oil tanks are petrol companies BP, Mobil and Z Energy. They have raised concerns about the safety of the farm in submissions to Environment Canterbury's Lyttelton Port Recovery Plan. They are calling for a 250-metre exclusion zone around the tanks. They say the zone would prevent danger to 30 homes nearby in the event of a disastrous fire or explosion. The oil companies say these safety factors will also be necessary if the proposed cruise ship terminal and associated hospitality hub is built nearby. Homes in the area were evacuated last year when a landslide fell into one tank, causing a leak. But if an exclusion zone was created, would this mean local homeowners would be forced to move, or would the tank farm be relocated? Locals say the maintenance and safety of the farm is the responsibility of the oil companies. But some have also asked, would this make any difference if a disaster similar to the Buncefield fire in England 10 years ago occurred here? In that disaster, 43 people were injured, and in addition to a fire, a huge gas cloud was created, making the disaster more widespread. The Christchurch City Council begins assessment work on Friday, and Littleton Port is yet to respond with its recommendations.
Well, her hospitality business in Oxford may be no more, so what next for foodie Jo Seeger? Chelsea Daniels spoke to her.
Well, she's been an icon in North Canterbury for decades, but now her cafe and cooking school business will be no more. Jo Seeger spoke to us today in regards to her hospitality business, and she says the debt just caught up.
It's just very bad timing that, the debt kind of caught up with us because, businesses actually has been in the last few months really back to pre-quake times. So that is a great sadness.
She has said trade downturn following the earthquakes is the reason why it went into liquidation recently.
Well, I think, Canterbury was just so low on visitors. I think the statistics were 1.5 million tourists down or something. And we just noticed overnight our income dropping below half. And I know myself, I didn't want to go out while all those earthquakes were shaking, and we didn't know if it was going to be 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month. No one had any idea it would be a couple of years and 11,000 shakes. And people just weren't going out. Certainly tourists weren't coming past. There was nowhere in Christchurch, no accommodation, and besides, having a look at the earthquake damage, people were just not putting Canterbury on their tourist map.
Seeger has said she owes a hefty tax bill to the IRD, but hopes to be able to pay it off if the liquidators get market value for selling her business. So, what's next for this cooking icon?
I'm certainly staying in Oxford. Ross and I are very involved locally. He's a senior fireman with the Volunteer Fire Brigade, and I'm very involved in the community and got lots of friends here, made lifelong friends through the cook school and cafe. So Oxford's home, so that's definitely how it is in the meantime. And we'll just see. I haven't really, I've got, my writing. I write articles for Australian Women's Weekly and write recipes, and I'm patron of hospice in New Zealand, so I do a lot of work, voluntary work around the country for them. So I've got plenty of things to keep me busy, and I take my cooking tours. So all of those things carry on. It's just that the cafe as we know it is no longer. Just have to sit tight. But as soon as I think of the next great idea, I'll let you know.
Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
They started out as a car club, but now they're also looking after those in the community who like a good drive, and today was no different. Here's Chelsea Daniels.
The Canterbury Land Rover Owners Club got down and dirty this morning. Despite the name, membership is open to all makes of four-wheel drive vehicles with capabilities similar to the Land Rover. Chairman Dave Lockett says if you're able to handle the terrain, you're welcome to get on board.
The club's open to any make that's got similar capabilities to Land Rovers with high-low ratio gearboxes, and if they want to come along and join us on trips and stuff like that, they can join the club.
The boys took their toys out today and got local charity All Star Kids involved. The club runs school holiday programs for special needs kids and have been for quite some time now.
Today we're doing our what we call the All-Star Kids program, which is special needs children. We'll meet them down the river shortly and we take them for a ride. We do it at every school holidays, in the second week of the school holidays. Every Wednesday, it's pretty much locked in the calendar. And they love the sensation of the rocking and the splashing, and so we've been doing that for about 15 years now.
The club enjoys four-wheel drive trips which vary between one-day local trips to week-long camping trips in more remote locations.
We grade our trips from 1 to 5, 1 being very simple, very limited amounts of damage or minimal damage, and then going right through to 5 where you just quite easy to bust your truck. So it's really, we tend to cater more for possibly more towards family.
Even though there were a few minor slip-ups. The trip went relatively hassle-free, And Dave says going in a group prevents major accidents from happening.
A lot of the tracks are quite well established in some places now, so you can see where the real tracks come out, and so you can make your line and head through there. So it's all just...
I see what you mean. You can see that's quite clear water.
Yeah, so you can see how deep it is. Sometimes you can see that that's quite clear, but it could be very, very soft. I mean, this shingle here is always very soft. You may not feel it in the passenger seat, but when you're driving, you can feel your truck trying to claw its way through. When you're in a group like this, you can see how other trucks are reacting and where the line they're picking, and 9 times out of 10 you can save yourself a lot of grief just by following the leader, really.
Active membership currently stands at around 175 members and was formed in 1966, where Life member David Harris attended the very first meeting.
The members are just up to about 1,200 now, so there's been a lot of members right throughout the whole time.
And what's your membership number?
7. There was 7 people at the first meeting, and so I finished up with number 7.
The Harris family have seen 3 generations enter the club, with David being the only one left standing.
Well, I've had 3 sons that have all had 4-wheel drives, and they've all been in, and they're now all out. And I've had 1 grandson. He was a member for a wee while, and he's pulled out too. So I'm the only one that's actually still a member of the family.
Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
Still to come here on CTV News, the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War is remembered. For those who served in Vietnam, today is a special day. It marks the first day New Zealanders fought against the North Vietnamese 50 years ago. And for one Canterburyan, the memories are just as strong as ever. Jared McCulloch explains.
On this day 50 years ago marks the first battle of New Zealand troops in the Vietnam War, with this country working alongside the United States and Australia. And Edward Gorman says it doesn't feel like that long at all.
Not really. It doesn't seem that long because there's always something that jogs your memory, you know, whether it's on the television or radio or whatever.
Edward is 80 years old. He lives with his wife Irene in a small flat in Christchurch, but his journey doesn't start here. This is a bit of a love story. Edward grew up in Wolverhampton in the UK, and at the age of 17 he wanted to travel the world. And the best way back in the day was to join the armed forces, but he was too young, wanting to go to Korea. So after trying and trying, he jumped on a boat and headed to Singapore, working in the support crew in Malaya, where he met the love of his life, Irene.
We supplied food to the orphanages and places like that, you know, and they were grateful, but it was never enough, you know. We could never do enough, you see, because there was a lot of things going on.
But he had to go back to the UK and couldn't afford to see Irene again. However, they met up many years later, got married, had children, and have been together ever since. Then Vietnam started. He was told,
don't expect to go to Vietnam because you need it here more, and you'll be staying here, you know. And it wasn't a few months later on, I was called in again for an interview with the company commander, and he said to me, Gorman, you're going to Singapore, pack your things, you know, and tell your wife and your family you'll be going in a week's time.
So he went and served there for just over a year, from October 1969 to November 1970, an experience he'll never forget.
A lot of people got hurt, and you know, soldiers say, you know, they want to go over to a place like Vietnam and fight and do this, but it's not all about fighting. You know, there's a lot of other things involved in wars, and there's people, you know, there's children, there's grown-ups, there's aged people. Everybody's involved. You can't go into a war and not get involved. You know, you have to try and do your best under the circumstances.
He arrived on the shores of Vietnam a few years after 1965, when the first New Zealand troops fought, aged 35. He took care of the soldiers by cooking food as a chef, but he and everyone else also served there for one purpose: to fight.
Now, whether you liked it or not, this was your main role. And if you had to pick up a gun, you had to pick up a gun. You know, you didn't go over there to become a chef, you know, and think that, you know, you're not going to get near, you're not going to get hurt. A lot of the corps personnel that was over there supporting the infantry did actually go out on patrols with the infantry and did do what was needed or necessary.
After 50 years, he says it's hard to look back on.
You never achieve anything by war. That's a sad part about it, you know. Wars are just a necessity for people who want to create havoc among other people.
After Vietnam, he moved to New Zealand with his family.
I went back to the camp in Singapore. I did, to the New Zealand Regiment's camp, and I was then. I had about 2 or 3 weeks holiday, and I was put on a plane with the family back to New Zealand.
Now retired, he stays active and plays a bit of golf, but he doesn't regret anything.
I wouldn't change it, never change it, you know, not for anything. My life's been good, you know, not all the time has the army been, you know, how to put it, a place that I'd, you know, sometimes you get the feeling, I wish I was out of here, you know. But at the end of the day, the army has been good to me. These wars that we've been having and everything else that goes with violence, you know, it should never happen, you know. But there's no way you're going to stop that, you know. Maybe one day somebody will come up with something, but I don't think it's going to happen in the future.
It's a day to remember for Edward, 50 years on. Jared McCulloch, CTV News.
And now it's time for the region's weather.
Kia ora Canterbury. Well, for the first time in a long while, we didn't see any icy frost this morning, with those northerly winds really warming the temperatures up. But let's take a look at today's highs. Twizel on 11 degrees, a little bit warmer for Geraldine, Temuka and Timaru, all on 14. Taking a look to central Canterbury now. Christchurch, 14 degrees for you, Leeston and Methven. A little bit cooler for Ashburton on 13 degrees there, and 12 for Akaroa and Darfield. Taking a look further north, Kaikoura, 13 degrees for you, Cheviot and Colwyn. A little bit warmer for Amberley and Rangiora and Oxford on 14 degrees, and just 11 degrees for Hanmer Springs there. Over to the Alpine region, Lake Tekapo, 10 degrees for you today. Let's take a look at tomorrow's weather for the major centres. Timaru, 13 degrees for you tomorrow, sunny skies as well with light winds. Could be a few southwesterlies in the evening though. Looking to Ashburton, a similar picture for Ashburton with the sunshine out, however 15 degrees, a little bit warmer for you, and 4 for your morning, not too bad. Over to Christchurch now, 15 degrees for your high as well with the sun coming through. Light winds for you and could be a few southwesterlies in the evening as well. Similar picture for Kaikoura, a little bit cooler though on 12 degrees and 2 for your morning. Let's take a look at other areas now for tomorrow's temperatures. Twizel on 13 degrees, a little bit warmer for Geraldine and Temuka, 15 degrees for both of you, and sunshine for South Canterbury. Looking to central Canterbury, 12 degrees for Akaroa there, a few cloudy patches and rain for Akaroa as well. Sunshine though for other areas, Darfield on 14 degrees, 10 for Methven there. Looking further north, Hanmer Springs, 13 degrees for you, a little bit warmer for Amberley and Colwyn, mostly northwesterly winds coming through, 16 degrees for Cheviot there, you're actually taking out the region's high tomorrow. And to the Alpine region, 8 degrees for Lake Tekapo. Let's take a look at the upcoming days now. Friday, we're seeing a slight southwesterly change, that will be easing in the afternoon, few rainy patches in the morning, those should ease in the afternoon as well. Looking to Saturday now, those southwesterlies are hanging on for Timaru and Ashburton, few cloudy patches and a little bit of drizzle there for Christchurch. Taking a look at other areas for the upcoming days, we are seeing that slight southwesterly change on Friday. That will be cooling the temperatures down a little bit. A few drizzle patches for most of the region. As we flip over to Saturday, we are seeing those cloudy skies there. Less rain though, which is good. So as we can see over the next coming days, that warm temperatures, they are lasting tomorrow, but we are seeing those southwesterlies come through on Friday. For now though, that's your weather update for Wednesday.
And that is CTV News. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good evening.
supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.